Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our little mini course here on unlocking meal times. And the goal here is I want you guys to learn why your child is struggling with eating food. And I'm going to also talk about how I help parents with this exact problem and how we get kids to go from afraid to try it and touch it to enjoying food and being a foodie and being excited about food. All right, so let's just jump right in. Right, so we have some goals here for this class, right? So I want you guys to learn what type of picky eater your child is. And you are going to be able to do this with the quiz that we have. So if you didn't come to this link via taking the quiz, if you're just finding this on YouTube, then you can just click below in the description. There is a link to the parent quiz. So it's a very short quiz. You can take it while you're watching this video, and it'll just give you some guidance on where your child falls. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but that's how you're going to learn what type of picky eater your child is. Okay. And next, we're going to learn why your child is stuck eating the same few safe foods. And they probably have even dropped some foods from their diet. But why are they still eating these couple foods and no other foods? Okay. We're going to learn why they are experiencing these extreme selective eating habits, because there is a reason for it, and it might be a surprising reason for you. A lot of parents think it's because they're behavioral. Some parents think that this extreme selective eating is typical, and usually this when it's very extreme like that, where they're only eating just a couple of foods, that is not part of a typical child development. um, Learn about how our brain works when it comes to food, right? So this is key. If we want to unlock meal times, we need to understand what was going on in the brain and why that it's causing them to not want to eat those new foods or try new foods. Okay. We need to also know what makes for a successful mealtime, right? If we're looking to have success, we need to know what the criteria is for success. The 4 pillars of mealtime success. So that's something that I've created. Um, Learning a new strategy that you can implement starting today, right? So I'm going to give you some tips along the way as we go. And some ideas on things that can kind of get you started right away. Okay. And then last, how we, foodology feeding, how we can help to move your child from this fearful place to actually being excited about food and enjoying food. Because, what I hear from parents is that they are struggling. They're making multiple meals. They are even bribing their kids and it's not working. I hear a lot of times they used to eat everything and they like kind of are confused about like why all of a sudden there was this shift, which hopefully I'm going to be able to explain that today. Um, sometimes our kids are so severe that like parents really are very constrained on like what they can do, where they can go. So things like going on vacation can be really hard because if you're going to a foreign country or someplace that, you're like, I don't know if they have that same exact box or meal that I'm used to, getting here, where we live. And that's scary to think like, okay, well, I know they're not going to eat unless it comes from this box, right? So that kind of limits you a little bit on some activities that you might be able to do. Especially activities like going to school, right? School lunches can be really hard. I've had some picky eaters that like food has to be at a very specific temperature. And you can imagine that that would be very hard if they're going to school. And how are you going to get their food to that same temperature that you're able to at home? A lot of schools, they're not heating food up for you or putting it in a refrigerator for you or whatever the requirements of your child are. They're just not accommodating that, right? So that can make things very challenging. A lot of parents even tell me that they've tried therapy. Like I am not the first person that they've seen. Not in every case, but in some cases they've come to me from other places or other courses that they've taken online. I've heard that a lot. And it just didn't work. Like it wasn't enough, or they felt it wasn't the right fit. But hopefully, what I'm going to explain here today will explain maybe why they haven't had success just yet. This one always breaks my heart, not being able to participate in birthday parties, especially their own birthday parties, right? Some of our kids actually won't even eat things like cake or cookies. They can't even really enjoy like that moment of, their birthday cake, or just going to other kids' birthday parties, watching all the other kids eat the pizza and the cake, and their kids are like, crying in the corner because they don't want to eat that, or there isn't anything else for them, or maybe they're eating their own food kind of, not with the rest of the group. So these are some things that I've heard a lot. Also, not all of our picky eaters, but there is a good handful that are sick very often. And the parents feel like it's because they're not eating very well. And that might be the case. Not all of our picky eaters get sick often, but that not getting sick often doesn't mean that their body has all the nutrients they need either. So at some point that will catch up. So we do want to, make sure we're getting those missing nutrients in as soon as possible. But let's just let's move on. We've got a lot to cover in this short course. So just a really quick, who am I? Like, who am I talking about picky eating? Like, why? What's my deal? So if you are new to my work, my name is Christine Murati Yoder, and I am a pediatric feeding therapist. So a speech pathologist by trade, I suppose. But not every speech pathologist is also a feeding therapist. Feeding therapists are often speech pathologists or occupational therapists. And it really just depends on if the individual has decided to take on some extra training and do feeding. But, just because you go to a feeding clinic, doesn't mean that every therapist there is going to be trained the same way, or trained to, certain extents. So I have, my backstory is I had my son, when my son was born, I had so much trouble with breastfeeding. And I started to connect that there was like this oral motor component to it, basically. And I started just learning, right? I'm on maternity leave from work, and I would just took course after course after course. And as I was taking courses, I realized that a lot of picky eating, um, things kept coming up, and they kept coming back to, they linked back to things that happened in infancy. And I noticed that correlation. So basically, I'd take a course and I'd learn something, and I was like, oh, wait, that's another piece of the puzzle. And then I take a course on sensory, and then I take a course on diet, and then I take a nutrition course. And then there is the mindset courses, right? So I kind of went down a rabbit hole of feeding, and I just learned a ton of different things, and I realized how complex feeding is, really. So I'm a speech therapist, basically, with a lot of extra training in feeding, from infants to, I guess you could say it's to adults, right? Um, but we primarily work with kids. For the most part, right? So this presentation, this course and whatever, it's geared to kids who are eating solid foods already, right? So not infants, even though I do have experience with infants, that's not the purpose of this course, right? So that's me, in a nutshell. I also have a serious love of food, and I have, really honestly, from way before I was a mom at all, or had any experience with taking feeding courses, nutrition and like holistic detox, all of that has been uh, like a hobby of mine, kind of. I know that might sound strange, but it truly is like a hobby. I actually just loved learning about all of that stuff. So it just kind of fit into my life Like it was sort of like it just fell into my lap, but it really made sense with like who I am because I just love food and I know the power of nutrition and getting the right nutrients and how important that is for the body. So just kind of, kind of connecting all those dots. So that's me. Okay, so why is your child still stuck on the same few safe foods? Right. So this is a hard question because it's really going to depend on your child, right? And your child is going to be a little bit different. Like there are no two picky eaters that I've had in my office that were exactly the same, that had the same profile. So that's why it's really hard, when there's like just a generic type of a course because you're just that information might not really apply to you and your child. Um, so why is your child still stuck on the same few safe foods? Well, do you think it's because you didn't expose them to enough foods? Or maybe you gave into their preferences for certain foods? Or do you think maybe you just did something wrong? Like maybe, they had a reaction to a food or they choked on a food and you just didn't react the right way and you like somehow messed them up. Well, it's no for all of those things. Our severe picky eaters have more going on. And a lot of parents tend to blame themselves and feel like they must have done something wrong, right? A lot of times parents will have one child who is great at eating, loves to eat, and then their next child, oh my gosh, like totally opposite. They have no idea. And they're the same parent to the same two children. And it's like something else is going on here, right? So I'm here to tell you that that is not the case. It's not because of something you did. There is something more going on. So the biggest secret that affects every picky eater on some level, this is rarely touched upon in therapy and in popular courses. I feel like they really don't talk about this, but it is general their mindset. And that's why I wrote the book Mealtime Mindset, because I feel like mindset is such a big piece to this puzzle. And if you're not addressing mindset, is part of your strategy on getting kids to eat more foods, you're going to have an uphill battle and you might not even be successful at all because it really starts and ends with their mindset. And let's get into it a little bit more specific. So, what are the parts of the brain? So, we have two parts to our brain. We have the conscious brain, and the subconscious brain. So, you might have heard these terms, back in the day when you were in school. So, the conscious brain, just to quick recap, is what we have direct control over. So, decisions and actions that you're making on purpose, right? So, think about some examples would be solving a math problem, planning out your day, putting things on a schedule, choosing what foods you'd like to eat. But then there's a whole other part of your brain. And you could see the visual that I have here that the conscious brain is just that iceberg that you see on top of the water. But look at the rest of that iceberg. It is hidden underwater and it's actually the main part of your brain. So that's right. Your subconscious brain, this is the stuff that happens automatically without your control. Of course, it's things like breathing, digestion, right? But there's other aspects to the subconscious brain. This might be like all of a sudden you get butterflies in your stomach and you're not sure why. You might just sort of automatically be driving your car. And sometimes you're like, how the heck did I get here? Well, it's in your subconscious brain that you know how to drive that car and you can just drive it almost on autopilot. Not good to do, but that's the help of your subconscious brain. Now, what about when you have a gut feeling about something, right? That's not your conscious brain talking, that's your subconscious. And your subconscious is controlling pretty much everything you do. You might think that you have conscious control over all of your decisions, but I am here to tell you that that is rarely the case. Your subconscious is driving this bus, whether you like it or not. And the decisions that you make are based on how your subconscious brain interprets all of the sensory information coming at it. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example of something that a parent might say, right? You might say to your kid, it's really good. You're going to love it. It has all the flavors you like, and, their conscious brain is going to probably agree with you, right? That makes sense. I do like all those ingredients. But if their subconscious brain is not on board, it's not going to happen, right? Nope, it's not safe. Um, don't even touch it, right? And that's where you get that behavior piece of like, well, why won't they touch it? I know they can touch it. I know they can touch it. I know it's not hard for them. You know what? I've even seen them do it before. It must be, they're just being defiant. It must be their behavior. It's actually their subconscious brain. That's what's driving the bus here and making them um, come up with these actions, right? Whether it's to touch it or not touch it, it's that subconscious brain. Um, let's do another one. Okay, just try one bite. It's not going to kill you to taste it. Now, I've heard this one before. I might have even said it at some point in my life. I'm sure. Right? I'm right there with you. But the conscious brain would know logically, of course, I'm not going to die if I taste it, right? My mom's not going to hurt me. But your subconscious brain is still screaming, nope, this is in the unsafe category. And you know what, Mom? I'm sorry, but it is not happening. And I put this little caveat here, if you're reading along with me, that it's this is something that I feel like goes very deep, right? So as per the time you didn't chew it well enough and it hurt to swallow it down, right? So, a lot of people think that there wasn't really like an incident where my kid choked on a food or had an allergic reaction to a food that, you would maybe associate like, oh, well, I can see why they wouldn't like that food because of that incident, right? But there can be trauma on different levels. And what's traumatic for one person is not traumatic for another person, right? But if you can imagine that if you didn't chew the food well enough, right, especially a food that needs to be chewed most, like meats and vegetables, right? Those are the two most fibrous foods that are going to take the most chewing endurance to break down, right? So if you didn't chew that food well enough because maybe you weren't paying attention, maybe your oral motor skills weren't great, and you just didn't chew it up enough, whatever the reason, something was lingering in your mouth. And at some point, maybe you went to go swallow and you were surprised that it was there and it threw you off, right? Is that trauma? Not maybe to you, but maybe to someone else it is, right? So the point is I'm making here is that the subconscious brain's job is to protect the body at all costs. So if the subconscious brain has linked a food to any sort of unsafe thing, it is going to it's going to say like no, like nope, that food's off the list. And remember, this is happening at a deep level. It's not happening on the conscious side. So it's not like your child is like, oh goodness, that was a little challenging to swallow. I wonder if I didn't chew that food well enough. I wonder if that's unsafe for me. They're not making that decision at the conscious level. It's happening without them knowing it at the subconscious level. So when they say, I don't know why I don't like that food, it's because their subconscious brain has stored some sort of a memory tied to that food. It might be tied to a certain, maybe whatever sensory properties they picked up. Maybe the food was too hard. Maybe that color of the food, it didn't feel right in their mouth. Maybe it was the texture. We don't know exactly. I'm not in their brain to be able to dissect it to that level. But what I can tell you is to think about it from this perspective. And that there can be a reason, a trigger that we don't know about, but their subconscious brain has linked that food to not be safe. And really, there's no way to kind of change the subconscious mind just with words just by saying, well, just try it. It's not going to kill you. That's usually not going to change the subconscious mind. Um, Now, can a child, push past their subconscious thoughts and, you know, make a conscious decision to try it anyway? They can, but it depends on how strong of a pull this subconscious brain is going to be, right? And I don't know what that is for every child. Right. So let's talk about feeding therapy or how to address feeding issues. So there's ways we can do it with our conscious brain and there's ways we can do it with our subconscious brain. And I'll tell you that regular tradition, like if you just go for feeding therapy, they're targeting the conscious brain, because I know I did for a very long time until I learned about the subconscious brain, right? So, doing behavioral therapy, doing some sort of a reward system, like you're going to lick this 10 times and then you're going to get a sticker or play with this toy, right? That's the conscious brain. Cognitive behavioral therapy, right? You're kind of talking it through, right? We're going back here. If talking it through was going to work, it probably would have worked already. Um, then food exposure, right? Okay, we'll just expose them to it and then eventually they'll eat it, right? But none of those are really targeting the underlying reason why they left the food in the first place, which is that the subconscious brain told them it wasn't safe, right? So, how can we address some feeding issues? So, this is, as far as I know, this is very unique to my company that I've created, the Foodology Feeding, that we really target the subconscious brain when we are doing therapy. So we can do this through subliminal audio, where they're listening to something that just sounds like ocean waves or music, and we have specific phrases underneath that music that the subconscious brain can absorb, but the conscious brain does not hear, that are saying positive things about food and helping the subconscious brain to sort of rewire and basically reprogram that instead of this being an unsafe food, that food is not safe to try, that food can be fun to try, that it's exciting to try new foods, that I love learning about new foods, right? We also use the safe and sound protocol, which is a way to regulate the nervous system, regulate specifically the vagus nerve, which runs from the brain to the gut, and helping basically that helps bring feelings of safety to the body, right? Which is targeting the subconscious brain, whose job it is to keep your body safe. Hypnotherapy. Now, that's not something we offer. We do know of somebody who does hypnotherapy at Food for Thought in Florida. But you have to be there's specific criteria to meet to do hypnotherapy, and you have to be a bit older. And you have to be able to follow directions very well. So it really depends on the type of person. Um, and then we use our mealtime mindset principles of how we talk about food, because talking now, it's different than just saying a phrase like, just try it. But when we talk about food, over time, collectively, in a very specific and intentional way, we are helping the brain to rewire and think about food differently. So it takes time, right? Using mealtime, all of these things are going to take time. None of these are going to be an overnight flip of the switch success, right? Because the subconscious brain, um, it's sort of wired that way, and it gets reinforced with every meal. So it takes a little bit of time to sort of unravel that, if that makes sense. But we use a variety of approaches. So we do a little bit of the conscious brain stuff, of course, too, right? Food exposure is important, no doubt, but we also are making sure that we're also targeting the subconscious brain, right? Right. So now, in working with hundreds and hundreds of feeding clients, I've been able to classify the severity of the feeding issue. Right. So this is where, if you took that quiz, or if you didn't take that quiz, now would be a great time to take it. Right. So this is going to help us create a plan on where to start and what's missing from what you're currently doing, so that your kids can move forward with food. Okay, so right now I have the Mealtime Success Pathway, which is something I have created. So basically, we're going to see, right, when you take that quiz, is your child in that very bottom? Are they fearful? Right? So, fearful kids, they're eating probably separate from others. They're probably taking a long time or a very short time, right? So their timing of meals is usually off. They probably need distractions to eat. They might get emotional during meals or not tolerate new foods. Meal times are just stressful, either for the kids or for the parents or both. They eat from a very limited variety of foods, and they are really refusing to try new foods that are not, within their absolute safe food categories. And these kids are really eating between 1 and 10 foods. And that's a very low number of foods, right? So we want kids to be up here at Foodie eating over 40 different foods. Um, Now, if your child is at the stuck level, they have a few more foods in their diet, but they're eating with others, right? They probably still need distractions, but they'll tolerate. You can put something new on their plate as long as you don't make them eat it or touch it, they'll probably be all right. They eat maybe a little bit more, maybe from an extra category of food. And if it's within their safe foods, they'll probably eat it. So, for example, if they eat breads, they'll probably try a new bread, but they're not going to venture very far beyond that. Then we have the curious level, which is, between 26 and, 39 foods, right before that 40. And this is where, they're trying most foods, but they're going to hesitate when it's a little too far outside their comfort zone. They might eat, a good amount of foods routinely. They're not super stressed at the table, but they're probably not at a place that you're happy with. They're probably able to sit with you, but distractions are probably still pretty helpful for them. Our goal in our program is to get all of our kids to the foodie level, which is there is no stress at this mealtime. They're eating a great variety of foods. They're not hesitating or afraid to try new foods. They could eat in any place, in a restaurant, at grandma's house, on vacation, with you, without you, with no issues. And it doesn't take them an extremely long time to eat, and they're not scarfing down their food in 3 minutes either. Everything is just as it should be, right? So that's our goal. And so to move from where your child is now, from fearful or stuck or curious to foodie, right? The goal is that you are going to learn things that are going to help you get to each level. So in comes our program, Unlocking Mealtimes from Fearful to Foodie. It's a transformation program for parents of kids who are very selective in what foods they will eat. And why from fearful, right? So there is this myth, right, that if kids are hungry enough, they will eat. But I'm here to tell you that that is wrong, because when you have fear, your cortisol levels go up and your hunger will drop down. So just because you're hungry does not mean you're going to eat. So our kids that are fearful, we need to bring down that fear. We need to help them regulate their nervous system, relax, feel safe around foods, drop the cortisol so that they can learn about foods, feel hungry, and learn to enjoy foods. But they're never going to learn to enjoy foods if they are stuck in this fear cycle, if their subconscious brain, if their programming is telling them it's not safe, just pushing past that, overriding that system is not going to help develop a love of food in the future. You might get a kid who tolerates eating more, but it's not going to be fun or enjoyable. So, how do we make it fun and enjoyable? Okay, so I have the mealtime success pillars, and these are the 4 pillars that are part of our evaluations that we do on our in person clinic. But in this program, in this Fearful to Foodie Unlocking Mealtimes program, we're looking at each of these areas across, all of those different, the fearful and the stuck, the curious. What do you need to learn in each of these pillars to get you to that next level, right? Because I bet you there's something missing. I bet you don't have a piece of information about one of these things, and it's holding you and your child back, right? So, what do you learn? What do we teach you? So, at the fearful level, you need some basics about some gut nutrition. We got to get rid of some of the bad, but we're not going to do that until we learn how to add in the good. We want to improve the nutrient density of what they're currently eating as much as possible in a way that works with their sensory system. And how do we work with their sensory system? We get their sensory profile. So we do that with you. So it's very tailored specifically to your child because everyone's sensory system is different. Even from one day to the next, it can shift, right? But knowing where your child resides most of the time is going to give you a lot of information. We're going to learn about food trauma and how to undo that. We're going to use those subconscious techniques to help target that part of the brain. We're going to target things like positioning so that they are as stable as possible. How to do food play in a way that works with their sensory system. We talk about the steps to eating. Then we go into mindset principles, right? How to create a positive meal environment, setting goals, routines that are going to get you the results, how we activate the subconscious brain and getting that started for you. Oral motor stuff, we are going to look at all of their oral motor skills and see what areas are weak or lacking that might be contributing to their problem, right? We talk about how to make the food manageable at this level and some of the very basics of eating, like eating 101, right? Because when you have all of these foundational tools, you're going to see that your child's going to make progress and get to the next level. So, the next level, once you have implemented a lot of our strategies that we taught you, you should be here at the stuck level, which is a step above where you were, right? But here you're going to learn more, a little bit more advanced things, right? Like food chaining, how to specifically choose which foods you're going to introduce in a way that they're going to be the most successful, the most likely to try, versus you just plopping a random food on their plate and having no idea what they'll do with it, right? So this is like more targeted, specifically based on the foods they're already eating, right? So once you learn how to do this, you're not going to need us to be like, okay, I want you to try this, 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 and this. You're going to know exactly how to food chain on your own, how to do the variety, when to limit drinks. We're building those hunger cues. Sensory, we're talking about problem solving, creating positive associations with food and changing cues. We go into mindset where we talk about flexibility, ways to target food, talking about food in other areas of their life, how to word things. So, what to say, what not to say. And then we get a little bit more advanced in the oral motor. So, this might be where we might start doing a few of like exercise type things if your child is up to it. Because at this stage, they're eating a little bit more now, and we could do a little bit more. Now, moving on, if they're at the curious level, you're at a pretty decent spot here. This is where we might talk about, kids that are really underweight or really overweight and how to sort of manage that, preventing kids from getting stuck on those same looping foods, right? Because now they have a variety. We want to keep that going. We don't want them to, go back to getting stuck again. Teaching them to self-regulate with sensory, still lots of mindset stuff, but just at a different level, at a level that they're currently at and a level that you're currently at because you've mastered the basics, right? Oral motor, this might be where we're really sort of refining things. Like, let's get rid of that tongue thrust. When are we going to talk to other professionals? Do they need orthodontic work? Well, they might. It depends on how severe their oral motor stuff is. But that stuff, we did in previous sessions, but now it's sort of time that we can address it a little bit more because they're at a better spot, right? So a lot of our parents, I was finding, they were doing things at maybe this level when their kids were only eating 3 foods. And that's just not the right order, right? Because you're going to be spinning your wheels talking about getting rid of distractions when they can't even sit down to a meal without freaking out. Okay. So we have to, I sort of organize a course in a way I hope that makes sense for parents to follow in a very step-by-step sequential way so that you don't get lost in the details of some of these higher level things. Like, you'll get there, but first we got to get a strong foundation, a strong base, right? So our goal is to get to you to a foodie, right? Someone who eats at the table with you wherever you are to eat. It's stress free. They eat from all different categories of food and they don't hesitate to try new things. They like food, right? That sounds like a foodie. So you shouldn't have many issues at all. Now, what is the cost of waiting and seeing? Because I've heard you should just wait and see with a picky eater, like at least 100 different times, right? So, there's a few things here. And I did a whole article on this topic specifically, but health is a big one, right? So, with every day, the ideal is that we want 30 different foods in our day, in our gut, to have a healthy microbiome so that our gut is functioning optimally, right? So if you're getting 2 or 3 of the same foods every day, every meal, okay, you're going to have nutritional deficiencies. And a basic multivitamin is not going to cover it. It just isn't. There's no way. Which is going to lead to growth and developmental issues. Like, how can you pay attention when your body doesn't have all the nutrients it needs? How are you going to grow strong when it doesn't have all the nutrients it needs? This puts kids at, they might not have a ton of issues now. Like I said, they're not always going to be chronically sick, these picky eaters. However, they are going to be at risk in the future for chronic conditions, developing chronic conditions, because for so long their body hasn't had the nutrients it needs. So we don't want that to happen. So, I do have my the course, the Picky Eaters Plate, but in this program, I actually incorporated a lot of those elements because it's so important. It just has to be a part of our total transformation program, because you have to start getting in the nutrients in the meantime, because learning to like food, going from fearful to foodie, is going to take time. But in the meantime, we can try to help get some of those in via supplements. In not even just supplements. Like, the goal is actually to get as much real food within their very limited diet, which, depending on what their diet is, we can do, right? So, that is a part of this course too. But, we don't want kids to, we want them to be at their full potential. How could they be at their academic peak when they're only eating, Cheerios and chicken nuggets every day? That's just not going to happen, right? You might not even know their potential because they just never were eating well, right? Emotionally, this really impacts us kids as well. Kids can feel very anxious around food, even if it's not outwardly, expressed. But kids who are only eating a few foods are clearly anxious around foods, because when a new food is presented, they do freak out, right? And that spikes their cortisol. They get stressed. But it also stresses us out because we want our kids to, to be amazing. We want them to have everything. We want them to be healthy, happy. And we know that what we put in our bodies is fuel. It fuels our day. It fuels our brain. It helps us sleep. It helps us learn. It helps us grow. So we know in our hearts when they're only eating a few foods that something is not good. It's not right. So it puts stress and guilt on us. So, remediating picky eating can actually help everybody feel a big sigh of relief, right? And that family meal tension and conflict does occur a lot. We've had a lot of families where there's just differing opinions. Like a lot of like there might be one side who is very much like, no, just make them do it. You're being too soft, right? And we help you through that in our course. We have lessons about how to talk to family members and things like that. But eliminating this problem also eliminates some of that family tension. And then there is an opportunity cost of finance. Okay. You are going to have higher food costs because you are inevitably throwing food away at some point. You might be able to eat, the scraps here and there of some of their foods, but inevitably at some point there is food waste. I've never had a family that said, "Oh, well, whatever they don't eat, we're able to we're able to make do and put it someplace else." Like usually there is food waste at some point. Um, don't forget the therapy costs. So even if your insurance covers it, you're paying a copay. And it's probably at least $30 to $50 a copay. And if you're only addressing one of those pillars or just the conscious part of the brain and you're missing other things, it's either that therapy is going to take a very, very long time, or you're going to do all that therapy and you're not going to see much movement anyway, right? So there is a therapy cost. And don't forget the time it takes to go to therapy and what you're missing out on because they're in therapy, right? We want kids to be out with their friends, spending time with their family, not going to therapy, right? So, um, not to mention the cost of supplements and medical interventions, constantly going to the doctor because they're sick, attention issues, getting evaluations, you know, there's a lot. So when you do that wait and see, sometimes things can get a little bit worse. Sometimes things get better. I'm not going to tell you that every kid is that starts out picky is going to end picky, but it does happen. It absolutely does. And I hate the wait and see because it doesn't make sense, because when you just know what the issues are and address them, you are saving so much, emotional, on the finance, on the health. Now, in my blog post, you'll see here it says estimated cost over $5,000 a year for a picky eater. Now, I do break that down in the actual blog post, so do check that out. That is on our website, but forget the title of it. But it is on our website under parent support in the blog posts. But it's based on, eating out a lot, common food waste with an average food bill, cost of therapy, things like that. So, the cost of not doing anything, it could actually cost you more in the long run than it would to just sort of tackle the issue head on. So our 3 promises are: we dedicate time, we give you clear answers, and we give you expert comprehensive care. So we want to give you that one-to-one time to ask all of your questions, to make sure it's tailored to your child, giving you clear answers about what to specifically do, what's next, what's the next step, right? And giving you comprehensive care. Like, we don't want to just address one of those pillars. We want to address all 4. And we want to do the conscious and the subconscious brain. It's very comprehensive. That's our goal. So some families that have had some success, a lot of parents do. Our most successful parents, even the ones that come to see us in person, you would be surprised, but our parents who do the parent course have the best success out of anyone. And I think it's because they're taking that ownership, they know what to do, and they could implement and execute it every single day versus putting it on the therapist as, okay, well, it's your time with my child and you do your thing and I'll just sit here and hang out on my phone, right? That's going to yield the slowest results or no results, right? Because one meal with a therapist is just not going to be enough to cut it. It's great if you can afford to do that in person, one to one, like kind of VIP treatment. But if you can't, I really tried to make this like the best option for families. That's the most economical and the easiest to implement, right? So I was really happy that these parents were able to see some great gains really quickly because they had the right strategies tailored to their child and they were implementing it themselves, right? And I've had parents tell me, "Oh, but they won't do it for me." And I'm telling you that that's part of the problem, right? We have to kind of fix and repair that. And learning the strategies, learning the what to say, what not to say, targeting the subconscious brain, that is all meant to fix that as well. But you have to do the work. I can't sit down and do it for you, right? So there's a lot of courses online, right? I probably not legally allowed to talk about what their names are, but so I'll just say other online programs, but they're usually just kind of geared for regular picky eaters, which are not our fearful and stuck eaters, which have a more severe problem, right? They're going to focus on like exposing you to new foods and how to do that in like a fun way, maybe talking about food play. And they're giving advice to the masses, right? Their programs are probably $50 to $100. And it's just general advice, like advice you'd find maybe on Instagram or something like that. And it's not going to cover all of those areas that we talked about versus our program. Versus our program, right? So you're going to get a literal roadmap with specific to your child, talking about all the areas that they struggle with, that they're successful with, and what we think your next steps need to be so that they are successful, right? Ours is for extreme selective eaters with a limited variety of foods. I will tell you it's not for tube-fed kids that will not eat by mouth. I'm not saying you wouldn't see any success with it, but I think you would actually need more of the one-to-one coaching than you get with our program. Just something to keep in mind. And it gives you the lessons that you need specific to where your child is at. So we used to have it where it was just one long program. Right now, I have it broken up so that you're only getting access to the information that is relevant to you at the time so that you're not overwhelmed, so that it is very step by step. And we're measuring your progress every step of the way. And you're talking to your feeding coach every step of the way because you can't get to the next spot if you're stuck. And we're here to get you unstuck, right? So it's very sequential. It's very like, okay, we're going to take this one step at a time and we're going to make sure that you're successful. And we use specific research backed strategies to help relax the subconscious brain, which I know is very different from any other programs on the market. And we use that personalized approach, right? So I put this in here. You see, it's a woman looking for a microscope. Well, that is because we literally put you under a microscope, not in like a scary way. It's no judgment. Sorry. It's all about, okay, let's look at the gut. What needs to be addressed? What's good? Let's look at the sensory system. Where are they overstimulated, understimulated? Where are we going to focus our time? It's very personalized and we are looking at everything. It's very comprehensive and very detailed. That's really what you need with feeding because feeding is very complex and nuanced and involves a lot of systems. So having somebody to literally focus you in on what needs to be addressed and in what order is really a game changer. So, what does our program include? We have a kickoff call where we're going to review all of your case history, answer your questions, and just kind of get to know you, right? That's your first meeting with your feeding coach. You're going to have access to the subliminal audios that we have, the safe and sound protocol that I mentioned. You get that personalized roadmap too. You get on-demand course access for a lifetime of the course, and the lessons are nice. There, a lot of parents tell me they like how short the lessons are. So in just a few minutes, you can get exactly what you need to know, and like complete that lesson. And you could take that and then go implement, or you can go on to the next one. But they're not like these long, like 1 hour sessions where you have to sit and take a lot of time. You can even listen to it on the go. There's an app, so you can listen to the audio. So it's very easy to implement. It's easy to get. We've got lots of worksheets, journal prompts, things to sort of keep you on target, keep you focused. Doing the work, whatever we can do to make it easier for you to implement. We have hopefully available. And then you get 7 30-minute one-to-one calls. So you have us to troubleshoot along the way, answer questions, and you're with one person. So that person knows you from beginning to end. And they know your child and they know you and they know what's worked, what hasn't worked, and can give really specific advice. So it's a great value, right? Especially considering that, like I said in my blog post article, a lot of picky eater families will spend over $5,200 a year just because they have a picky eater. That's just the food waste from that child, the feeding therapy, money wasted going out to eat, the meals they won't have, or you buy things from them from the store thinking they're going to love it and they never eat it and you don't really want it, like things like that, right? So that adds up. So I tried to make this an incredible value. But the real value is that your kids are just going to eat the food that you make. And that is literally priceless because, again, their health will improve. Your stress and their stress will improve. Um, and, it'll cost you less in the long run, right? That was kind of the goal here. So I do have some bonuses as well. My Picky Eaters Plate Book, the Nutrient Dense Cookbook are included as part of this package. We also have like a few different guides, lists, printable things that are going to, just be helpful. They're just, they're things that we don't have available anymore. Like some of them used to be online. They're no longer online. Like the only where you can get them is here in this course. And there's just more bonus videos and lessons. So I didn't include every single topic and lesson in those slides. There's actually more. So there's tons and tons of value here. And of course, the cost, right? So I tried to make it manageable. So 6 payments of $450, right? So if you break up that cost of the $5,200 a year for a picky eater, it breaks down to about $433 a month. So it's a little bit more than that. But like I said, hopefully the value of not having them be a picky eater, will pay for itself over time in many, many different ways, right? Not just financially, but in their health, their academics, their education, their emotional, like hopefully all of that will be able to improve. So we have a link in the description to go to the website to learn even more about the program. And to think it over. But if you think that this could be for you, or if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments underneath this video, and I'll try to respond to them. But I tried to make this as easy and accessible as I possibly could, so that hopefully as many parents as possible can benefit and learn these strategies and get their kids eating as healthy as possible. Um, so I really look forward to meeting all of you and, hoping you join us on inside of the course. And, I wish you guys all the best and I wish you lots of happy meal times and for years to come. So I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and maybe I'll see you on the inside.